They buried her with prayers. They believed the nightmare was over. But death did not stop Lucy Westenra. When children began disappearing at night, when a beautiful woman was seen walking among graves, the truth became impossible to deny. This was no ghost. This was something far worse. Lucy had returned, but she was no longer human. Dracula Chapter 6. Lucy's illness. Lucy Westenra was no longer the same girl. What had begun as simple fatigue slowly turned into something far more disturbing. Each morning, she woke weaker than the day before, her once bright energy fading like color drained from a photograph. Her laughter became rare, her movements slow, and her skin grew paler with every passing night. At first, everyone believed it was nothing serious. Lucy herself dismissed the concern with gentle smiles, insisting she was simply tired. The sea air, the excitement of recent events, and her restless sleep seemed reasonable explanations. But Mina Murray knew better. She watched closely, noticing details others overlooked, the way Lucy's hands trembled, the shadows beneath her eyes, the unnatural coldness of her skin, even on warm days. Most troubling of all were Lucy's nights. She began to sleepwalk again. Mina caught her wandering toward open windows, toward the sea cliffs, toward darkness itself. Each time, Lucy appeared calm, almost peaceful, as though guided by an unseen call. And each time she awoke with no memory of where she had been or why. Then the marks appeared, small, faint wounds on Lucy's neck, so light they could easily be dismissed as insect bites. Lucy laughed when asked about them, but Mina felt a chill she could not explain. Something about those marks felt wrong, deliberate, intimate. Doctors were summoned. Dr. John Seward examined Lucy carefully. He was intelligent, modern, and confident in science. Yet despite repeated examinations, he could find no cause for her condition. Her symptoms made no sense. She was losing blood, but there were no visible injuries. Her pulse weakened daily. Her sleep was unnatural, deep and difficult to break. As Lucy's health declined, her behavior began to change. At times she spoke with an intensity that startled those around her. Her voice carried a strange softness, almost seductive, utterly unlike her gentle nature. Mina once heard her whisper words she could not remember afterward, words that felt heavy with longing and hunger. The nights grew worse. Lucy's sleep became deeper, more dangerous. No amount of calling could wake her easily. When she did awaken, she seemed distant, as though part of her had not fully returned. Mina began to stay by her bedside, afraid to leave her alone even for a moment. And still, the doctors failed. Desperate, Seward reached out to his former mentor, a man whose knowledge went beyond conventional medicine. Professor Abraham Van Helsing arrived soon after, bringing with him an air of calm authority and unsettling insight. Van Helsing took one look at Lucy and knew this was no ordinary illness. He asked questions others had not thought to ask. He examined the marks on her neck closely. He listened to descriptions of her sleepwalking with grim attention. When told of her weakness, her blood loss, and her unnatural sleep, his expression darkened. That night, under his instructions, Lucy received a blood transfusion. For a brief time, it worked. Color returned to her cheeks. Her strength improved. Hope flickered in the room like a fragile flame. Mina allowed herself to breathe again, believing they had finally found a solution. But the relief did not last. By the next morning, Lucy was weaker than before. The blood that had restored her strength was gone, as if it had been stolen from within her body. Van Helsing's concern deepened. He ordered another transfusion, then another. Each time, the result was the same: temporary recovery followed by rapid decline. Something was feeding on Lucy, something that came only at night. Van Helsing began placing strange protections around her bed, flowers with a sharp, heavy scent. He instructed that they must never be removed. He warned Mina not to let Lucy sleep without them. Not even for a moment. For the first time, Mina felt true fear. This was no illness, no disease. This was an invasion. Far away, in the stone prison of Castle Dracula, Jonathan Harker was trapped in silence and terror. In England, Lucy Westenra was slowly being drained of life. The darkness had crossed the sea, and it was no longer hiding. Chapter 7. The Ship of Death. The storm arrived without mercy. For days, the sea near Whitby had been restless, its waves crashing harder against the cliffs as though warning the town of something approaching. Dark clouds gathered low in the sky, choking the horizon, and the wind howled through narrow streets with unnatural fury. Fishermen stayed ashore. Ships avoided the coast. Yet one vessel, driven by forces unseen, did not turn away. It came at night. Mina Murray witnessed the storm from the safety of the cliffside path, holding Lucy tightly as the wind threatened to tear them apart. Thunder cracked overhead, splitting the sky in violent flashes of white. Rain lashed down, blinding and relentless. And through that chaos, Mina saw it. A ship. It emerged from the darkness like a ghost, its sails torn, its mast damaged, yet still moving forward, as if guided by an unseen hand. No lights burned aboard, no voices cried out. The vessel fought neither the waves nor the wind. It simply advanced, silent and unstoppable. Moments later, it crashed against the shore. The ship ran aground with a sound like bone splintering, drawing the attention of the entire town. People rushed toward the harbor despite the storm, lanterns flickering wildly in the rain. Mina followed, her heart pounding with dread she could not explain. The ship was called the Demeter. Authorities boarded the vessel once the storm eased enough to allow access. What they found made no sense. There was no crew, no captain, no sailors, no signs of struggle or escape. Only one body lay aboard. A man lashed to the wheel, dead, his face frozen in terror. In his clenched hand was a crucifix. He had tied himself there willingly, choosing death over whatever hunted him on that ship. Below deck, they discovered the cargo. Large wooden boxes, filled not with goods, but with earth. Strange, dark soil sealed within coffins. No one understood why anyone would transport dirt across the sea in such a manner. The ship's log, however, told a far more terrifying story. As Mina later read the recovered journal, each entry grew more desperate than the last. The crew spoke of a presence aboard the ship, something they could not see clearly, something that moved only at night. One by one, sailors vanished. Fear turned to madness. Discipline collapsed. By the final entry, only the captain remained. He wrote of a creature that came with the darkness. Then the writing ended. That very night, as the storm finally passed and the ship lay broken against the shore, Lucy's condition worsened. She became restless, agitated, her breath shallow and uneven. Mina stayed at her side, noticing how Lucy's eyes opened briefly, staring not at the room, but toward the window, toward the sea, toward the ship. Later, witnesses claimed to have seen a large black shape leap from the wrecked vessel and disappear into the night. Some said it moved like an animal. Others insisted it was something else entirely. No one could agree, except on one thing. Whatever left the ship was alive. The boxes of earth were transported inland, scattered quietly to various locations. No one questioned it at the time. No one connected the cargo to Lucy's illness. No one yet understood that the sea had delivered something ancient to English soil. But the damage had already been done. The Demeter had completed its journey. It had not carried a passenger. It had delivered a predator. And now England was no longer safe. Chapter 8. Mina's Journal. Long rewrite American storytelling style. I write this not to calm myself, but because I fear that if I do not record these events, I will begin to doubt my own senses. Too much has happened too quickly, and the line between reason and fear feels thinner with each passing day. Lucy is worse. There is no other way to say it. After the wreck of the Demeter, her decline accelerated, as though whatever had arrived with that cursed ship had found her at once. She sleeps longer now, and when she wakes, it is only briefly. Her strength fades like a candle struggling against a draft. At times, she looks at me with eyes that seem unfamiliar, older, deeper, filled with something that frightens me. Last night, she called my name. Her voice was soft, almost tender, but there was an urgency beneath it that made my heart race. When I reached her bedside, I saw that the window was open. The night air poured in cold and damp, carrying with it the distant sound of the sea. Lucy was standing. I do not know how long she had been out of bed. She stood motionless, staring into the darkness beyond the glass, her face calm, her lips parted slightly as if listening. I spoke to her gently, afraid to startle her. She did not answer. When I touched her arm, she turned toward me slowly. For one terrible moment, I did not recognize her. Her eyes shone unnaturally bright, and her expression held a strange mixture of longing and hunger. Then, just as suddenly, the look vanished. She swayed, weak, and I caught her before she fell. She remembered nothing in the morning. Dr. Seward returned later that day, his concern barely hidden behind professional composure. He examined Lucy again, his frustration evident. Her pulse was faint, her body cold, and yet there were no signs of illness that medicine could explain. Professor Van Helsing arrived shortly after. From the moment he entered the room, the atmosphere changed. He moved deliberately, observing everything. Lucy's posture, the open window, the faint marks on her neck. When he spoke, it was with calm authority, but his eyes reflected deep unease. He asked me questions that made my blood run cold. Did she sleep near an open window? Was she ever left alone at night? Were the flowers removed, even briefly? I answered honestly, though fear tightened my chest with each word. Van Helsing nodded slowly, as though my responses confirmed what he already suspected. That night, he insisted that Lucy's room be sealed, windows closed, doors locked. He placed the strange flowers, sharp-smelling and heavy, around her bed, and instructed me never to let them be removed, no matter what Lucy said. She may beg, he warned me quietly. She may plead. You must not listen. His words unsettled me more than I cared to admit. As night fell, Lucy became restless. She tossed and turned, murmuring softly, her hands clutching at the sheets. At times, she spoke words I could not understand, whispers that sounded like invitations rather than pleas. Then she woke suddenly. Her eyes flew open, and she sat upright with startling strength. She called out, not for me, but for someone else. Her voice was low, filled with longing. Van Helsing acted immediately. He pressed her back gently but firmly, forcing her to lie down. The moment the flowers brushed against her skin, she recoiled, letting out a sound that was half cry, half snarl. I had never heard such a sound from a human being. Slowly, her strength faded, her breathing steadied. She sank back into sleep, leaving me shaking beside the bed. Van Helsing turned to me, his expression grave. The enemy is close, he said. Closer than you think. I asked him what he meant. He did not answer directly. Instead, he told me to prepare myself, to be strong, to observe, and to trust that what we were facing was real, no matter how impossible it seemed. That night, as I sat watching Lucy sleep, I felt certain of one thing. The danger was no longer distant. It was no longer hidden. It was watching us, and it knew Lucy's name. Chapter 9. Lucy's Transformation. Lucy was fading. There was no longer any room for doubt or false hope. Each passing hour, seemed to steal something vital from her. Strength, warmth, humanity itself. The girl who once laughed freely and filled every room with light now lay silent and pale, her breathing shallow, her body little more than a fragile shell holding on to life. Mina refused to leave her side. Day and night, she watched over Lucy, memorizing every movement, every breath. Sleep came only in short, restless fragments, and even then Mina dreamed of shadows leaning over Lucy's bed, of whispers carried on cold air. When she woke, her fear never fully left her. Professor Van Helsing remained calm, but his calmness was heavy, burdened with knowledge he had not yet fully shared. He examined Lucy repeatedly, studying her as if she were both patient and puzzle. The faint wounds on her neck darkened slightly, no longer easy to dismiss. They marked her not as sick, but as claimed. Another blood transfusion was performed. For a few precious hours, Lucy seemed better. Color returned to her cheeks. Her pulse strengthened. Those who loved her dared to hope again. But Van Helsing did not relax. He watched closely, knowing the pattern too well. By the following morning, the improvement was gone. Lucy was weaker than before. It was as if the life given to her had been drained away in the night, stolen silently while she slept. No wound bled, no attacker was seen, and yet the result was undeniable. Van Helsing finally spoke the truth, carefully, deliberately. "This is not an illness," he said. "It is an attack." Mina felt her heart sink. She had known this in her soul, yet hearing it spoken aloud made it terrifyingly real. Lucy's behavior changed again that night. She grew restless as darkness fell, her body tense, her breathing quickening. She spoke Mina's name with an unfamiliar tone, soft, coaxing, almost seductive. When Mina approached her bed, Lucy smiled. It was not Lucy's smile. There was something predatory in it. Van Helsing intervened quickly, placing protective charms around the bed and insisting the flowers remain untouched. Lucy reacted violently to their presence, tearing at them with sudden strength, her voice sharp with anger and frustration. "Take them away," she demanded. "They hurt me." Mina hesitated. Van Helsing's warning echoed in her mind. With shaking hands, she replaced the flowers and held Lucy firmly until the struggle passed. Slowly, Lucy collapsed back into unconsciousness, her strength spent. The following days were a blur of fear and exhaustion. Lucy drifted in and out of awareness, her moments of clarity growing shorter. When she did speak, her words were strange, sometimes affectionate, sometimes cold, sometimes filled with longing for the night. Her eyes changed. They seemed brighter, sharper, more alert in the darkness than in daylight. Mina noticed how Lucy seemed almost uncomfortable in sunlight, turning her face away from windows, seeking shadow instinctively. Then came the night that changed everything. Lucy's breathing grew shallow, uneven. Her pulse weakened rapidly. Van Helsing was summoned at once. But even before he arrived, Mina knew what was happening. Lucy was dying. As Van Helsing entered the room, Lucy opened her eyes one last time. For a brief, heartbreaking moment, her true self returned. She looked at Mina with recognition, fear, and love. "Mina," she whispered, "don't leave me." Mina held her hand, tears streaming down her face, unable to speak. Lucy's grip tightened briefly, then loosened. Her breathing stopped. The room fell silent. Lucy Westenra was dead, or so it seemed. Van Helsing stood motionless, his expression grave. After a long moment, he closed Lucy's eyes gently and spoke words Mina would never forget. "The body is dead," he said quietly, "but the enemy may not be finished with her yet." That night, as Lucy lay still and pale in her bed, a terrible truth settled over the room. Death was not the end. For Lucy, it was only the beginning. Chapter 10. The Unholy Return. Lucy Westenra was laid to rest beneath white flowers and solemn prayers. The funeral passed quietly, wrapped in the polite rituals of grief that society expects. Friends mourned, tears were shed, words of comfort were spoken. To the world, Lucy was gone. But Professor Van Helsing did not mourn. He watched. From the moment Lucy's body was placed in the coffin, Van Helsing's expression never softened. His eyes followed every movement, every shadow, every sound. Mina noticed this and felt a deep unease settle within her. There was something the professor was waiting for, something he feared, yet expected. In the nights that followed Lucy's burial, strange stories began to circulate through Whitby. Children were found wandering the streets at dawn, pale and weak, speaking of a beautiful lady who had called them into the dark. Some bore small wounds on their necks, marks disturbingly similar to those Lucy once had. The townspeople whispered of ghosts, of spirits that refused to rest. Van Helsing listened closely. He knew the truth. Mina, torn between grief and terror, confronted him at last. She demanded answers, real ones. No more half-truths, no more careful silence. Van Helsing sighed heavily and spoke words that shattered the last of her certainty. "Lucy is not at peace," he said. "What walks now wears her face, but it is no longer her soul."